Hey Centra, thanks so much for tuning in once again for Centra Wellbeing 2020. Aubrey and I are certainly excited to meet you here once again in this space to talk about well-being. We have learned so much already.
Yes.
I'm so excited about this. It's not a topic that I know a great deal about, but I'm learning, and I just think that it's really a good incentive and a good avenue for us to get into for 2020.
Absolutely.
The year of well-being. Yeah. So this is episode 3, and this week we are going to talk about each of the tenets of well-being, and we're going to get a little bit more in depth, not a whole lot, but a little bit more. Last week we introduced you to those 5 tenets, and so those are social, physical, financial, community, and professional. And then this week, again, we're going to talk just a little bit about what each of those tenets are.
Yep.
So let's get started. The first thing that we're going to talk about is social well-being. Aubrey, tell us about that.
So social well-being is pretty self-explanatory. I feel like it's one of those things I could ask anyone and get a fairly similar answer. But when we think of our social well-being, it truly is, a time experienced with friends, family, the relationships that we're building, and the connections that we're making day in and day out.
Yep, makes complete sense. So kind of who you are on a social level outside of a professional level.
Yep.
Yeah, okay, good. That's social. Number 2 is our physical well-being. And we talked a little bit about last week how this can seem just like exercise, but it's not always that, and there are certainly more components. And so again, tell us about physical.
So for physical well-being, we want to make sure that we do focus on the exercise component of that and make sure we're keeping our bodies healthy in that way. But we also want to make sure we're focusing on how are we feeding our bodies, the nutrition that we're taking in. What about our mental well-being? There's a lot out there that we can be doing to make sure that we are staying sharp, that we feel good about how we're interacting daily with ourselves, with our families, with our colleagues, and things like that. So it spans mostly those 3 areas. And then also the other thing we want to think about is sleep. Sleep's a really important thing for everyone.
It is. Not a whole lot of high-functioning well-being, physically or mentally, with no sleep.
Absolutely.
So definitely sleep's high on the list. So then our third component would be financial. And again, this might seem very straightforward. Like, do you know how to keep your checkbook balanced? Do you have money in your 401k? Are you planning for the future? That kind of thing. But sometimes financial, and yes, those are all aspects, but then there are a few additional things that about financial well-being.
So of course, as Stephanie mentioned, when we think of financial, we think of those tangible things like our day-to-day finances. So what investments are we making? How are we planning for the future? Are we able to do those things right now? But the other thing that we want to consider is how are we using the funds that we do have to make good memories and enjoy the experiences that we have in the moment with our family and or friends.
Yeah. I always think about that kind of as like, I think one thing that we'll talk about later in stats is the fact that it shows that you actually have more of a return on spending money on an experience and making memories than you would if you bought like a desk. Or if you bought something, of course a desk, but if you bought something material, that kind of wears off quickly, but having those memories and those experiences. And so how do you spend your money? And are you getting full return on that?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've talked through the first 3. Number 4 is community, and this is probably one that maybe we don't fully understand, or is maybe sounds like it's closely connected to some of the others. What is community well-being?
So community well-being, I really love this one because I think that it brings in a component of not only how am I taking care of myself, but what am I doing for my community that actually in return is giving me a positive return on my health and helps me thrive more as an individual. So that looks like, how am I giving back? Am I volunteering? What am I doing from an outreach standpoint to reach out to those in my community? What kind of passion am I instilling in my own life to be able to do those things? And when I think giving back, the one clarifying factor I want to make there is it's not necessarily financial giving back. It's actually a big component of time. That volunteer piece is really important. And as Stephanie has talked about, there's studies on pretty much everything that you can imagine out there, particularly on all of these topics. But the importance of giving back and how much it really impacts your own ability to stay well and thrive as an individual.
That's good to know. Our last tenet is professional, and we're all here Centra caregivers, so it's something that's top of mind. We just have to be careful that professional doesn't take over the rest of our lives, right?
Absolutely.
So tell us what it looks like to be professionally well.
Yes. So you mentioned taking over our lives.
Right.
That work-life balance is so important for each one of us, so that we perform better, so that we feel better, and so that our families probably get to enjoy us a little bit more as well. So that's a really big component of that professional piece. But the other thing that we think about is when we consider, for me personally, my professional development. Am I growing? What am I doing to grow myself professionally so that I can continue feeling good about what I'm giving back to my workplace? Am I engaged in the work that I'm doing? If I don't feel good coming into work day in and day out, likely I'm not as engaged as I could be. So how can I make that change?
Absolutely. So I guess we're kind of getting the idea now that well-being is really about every single piece of who we are and making sure that we're well in every aspect of who we are.
Yes. Thriving.
Great. Well, Centra, thank you so much for tuning in again. We want to encourage you this week to do well, to think well, to be well. Tune in next week, and we hope you have a great week.